It is great to see a room full of friendly faces, both new and familiar, for today. We'll decide at the end whether this is our inaugural annual session like this or a one-off, but we're all very excited to bring you together to spend the afternoon, talking about decarbonization research at the University of Michigan and how we can take it bigger. As I think a lot of you know, I'm Jennifer Haverkamp, the Graham Family Director of the Graham Sustainability Institute. We're your host for the day. I think it's also very fitting that we are having this event at the same time 100,000 people are gathering in New York City for Climate Week. So this is happening all across the country and the world, that folks are focused on climate change. And I know that Shalanda could have been there, but she came to be with us instead. So thank you. Okay. Graham launched the Carbon Neutrality Acceleration Program in 2020, and since then, we've been dedicated to supporting and connecting the diverse and impactful decarbonization research efforts across the University of Michigan. We have an exceptional research community, and that makes today an exceptional opportunity to convene that community, reaffirm our collective leadership in decarbonization at a moment when momentum around climate action is stronger than ever, and it needs to be. I'm going to give you a little overview of our agenda. The potential in having so many of us gathered here in this room is tremendous. We have the chance today to connect voices across departments, disciplines, campuses, ensuring that the groundworking work we're each doing can inform and elevate one another. Together, we can build on our shared efforts, inspire new collaborations that will propel Michigan's leadership in decarbonization research even further. We'll have meaningful discussions that will help shape the future of that research, exploring ways to strengthen our collective impact. So this is an opportunity both to reflect on our progress and to dream about what we can do together that takes us even farther. And I would say that the market forces are increasingly aligning with the push to decarbonize, which create even more opportunities for universities like us to drive innovation, to influence policy, and contribute to what we all want, the more sustainable future. We also are at a moment of significant opportunity because of the university's prioritization of climate action. You see this in our new strategic plan, Vision 2034. You see it in the soon-to-be-released campus plan for 2050, and the capital campaign. We have Elizabeth up here, our capital campaign, and Jenny, which will make sustainability, climate action, and environmental justice one of 4 key cross-cutting themes when we launch that new campaign. So we'll have, we hope, lots of resources to help take this work further. We also have a powerful trio of climate champions now leading our work here. We have our inaugural Vice Provost for Sustainability and Climate Action, Dr. Shalanda Baker, to guide the academic enterprise. We have Shauna Weber, our Associate Vice President for Campus Sustainability, who's leading the campus sustainability work. And we have Tony Denton, who I don't think is here, to lead sustainability for Michigan Medicine. Now, I haven't decided whether to call them the Troika or the Triumvirate or the Trilateral Commission, but these 3 are going to do great things together. We're going to kick off today's event with a fireside chat for Dr. Baker. I don't see the fireplace, but we'll improvise. Then she is going to moderate the Research Community Insights panel, where leaders from across campus are going to discuss key strategies and opportunities for the future of decarbonization research here. Then, we're all, I hope all, going to move to the Great Lakes room for the continuation of our program. There you will have the opportunity to engage in community response conversations, where you can share your thoughts, your reactions, your aspirations to continue the exchange that's going to begin in this room. How are we going to capture all these great ideas? We have with us today Yen Azaro, who is our graphic recorder. And she's going to be generating a visual mural as we go. Folks will also be taking notes, but the mural along with your insights and feedback, are going to be compiled into a summary document that we can use for further conversations, for future planning, going forward after this event. So before we dive in, I do want to thank some of the many people who've helped make today possible. First, our co-sponsors, the Center for Sustainable Systems, the Herb Institute, the Fastest Path to Zero, the Global CO2 Initiative, the Institute for Energy Solutions, the Office of the Vice President for Research, the School for Environment and Sustainability, and the Taubman College of Architecture and Urban Planning. Definitely a group effort. I also want to give a special thank you to Maggie Allen, our collaborative research manager for CNAP and the Graham team, who've put a lot of great effort into making this event happen today. Thank you. Finally, thanks to all of you for being here today. I know that September is a crazy busy time, and this one seems especially crazy. So your time with us this afternoon, we appreciate how precious that is, and how coming here shows how critical this work is. So on behalf of all the leadership gathered here today, we appreciate your contributions, and let's get to it. Okay. All right.
Great. Are you?
Oh. Yep. I get to introduce you.
I think yours is off. So.
How about now?
Perfect.
All right. Okay. To begin our conversations and to help you all get acquainted with our new Vice Provost, I'm honored to introduce Dr. Shalanda Baker. Before joining the University of Michigan earlier this month,
Correct. Right.
Shalanda directed the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Energy Justice and Equity. Over her tenure within the Biden administration, she led numerous strategies aiming to enable an equitable energy transition, including developing the framework for the White House's Justice 40 initiative and Regional Energy Democracy initiative. She has a background in law, like me, and previously held faculty positions at Northeastern University, the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and the University of San Francisco, among others. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Great to be here.
Okay. Well, I'll just dive right in, if I may.
That sounds great.
Okay. As you may know, Shalanda wrote a book, Revolutionary Power. This book is deeply personal, intertwining your own story with energy policy and the drive for equity. Many people here may know of you from the book or your time at DOE, but we'd love for you to tell us a little bit today about the personal journey that shaped your perspective. How did your upbringing and experiences shape your thinking on energy equity and policymaking, and influence your approach as an activist, a legal scholar, and an administrator?
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, it is amazing to be here. And I know you all are incredibly busy because I know some of you personally. And I know that you've taken time out of your schedules to be a part of this conversation. We're kicking it off in this fireside chat, but really, my understanding and my hope for this event is that it really is a conversation among all of us. But is this too loud or are we good? Okay, perfect. I have a loud voice already, so I always worry that I'm yelling at people. Okay, so you mentioned my book, Jennifer. It's sort of a book that wasn't ever meant for academia. It's a book that's meant for moms and dads and aunties and uncles, people who struggle with the impacts of the energy system, but who don't understand the policy levers behind it and what actually creates our energy system. So I started writing the book, and initially I was sort of reprising a lot of my scholarly work, and then I realized I had to bring myself into it. So who am I? Who am I to this community? Well, I'm a queer woman, proudly so, African American, and African American to me means that I share the experience of so many in this country that experience the negative impacts of the energy system, and I'll dig a little bit into that. I'm also a veteran, a former military officer. I graduated from the Air Force Academy. I was discharged from the military honorably, though, under the don't ask, don't tell policy in the late 90s, early 2000s. I am also a lawyer, and I think I heard the first cheer ever when someone said, we're lawyers, so thank you for that, whoever gave the love. But I am a lawyer. I'm a former corporate lawyer. I worked as a project finance lawyer, so I helped to build energy projects all over the world. I spent time in Japan as a lawyer as well during the financial crisis. But I think it's important to talk about my entry point into this world of justice. So I mentioned, again, I was a corporate lawyer. So I had the privilege of being in Japan in 2008. We all thought it was going to be a really lovely boondoggle assignment, but I got there a week after Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy protection. So I quickly became a bankruptcy lawyer in a very short time. And so I watched as the world was trying to save a financial system that in many ways I thought was broken, and of course, others were beginning to write about that and see the issues with the financial system. I didn't mention that I'm also a first-generation college graduate, first lawyer in my family. And so the financial crisis had a pretty big impact on my family. So my mom and my sister were underemployed and unemployed, respectively. There were lots of lawyers who were losing their jobs as well. 2008 was also the hottest year on record at that time. We also welcomed our first Black president into the White House. We had elected him in that fall of 2008. So I was sitting there in my office in Japan with all of these dimensions and dynamics, around me. So again, hottest year on record, a financial crisis that was really impacting communities of color, and then the election of President Obama. So there was a lot of hope as well. I spent that year in Japan thinking about my role and my responsibility as a lawyer in the world. I went to law school not to be a project finance lawyer, a corporate lawyer working in Japan. I went to law school to change the world, and I never lost that. So at the end of that year in Japan, I quit my job. And I know, see the eyes, it's like, my mom had the same reaction. She was like, why, you're quitting your job? You haven't gotten fired yet. So I quit my job, and I bought a one-way ticket to Mexico. And I had this sort of naive vision of working with communities that were fighting against oil and gas development, major developments. I learned about a community in Colombia, in El Choco, this region that is predominantly Black, who were fighting against development. And I was like, I want to work with that community. But I started my journey in Mexico to learn Spanish, and I never left Mexico. Actually, ended up in the state of Oaxaca, which is a state in the south, the southern part of Mexico, the second poorest state in Mexico. And it's home to 14 different indigenous groups. They all speak different indigenous languages with different lineages. And while I was there in Oaxaca, I met an indigenous group in El Istmo de Tehuantepec, which is like the isthmus part of that state, who were fighting against wind development. So the isthmus is one of the windiest places in the world. And that community had been dispossessed and displaced due to our march to tackle the climate crisis. And so for me, there was a sort of lightning bolt moment where literally I was like, I think this might be my work. I had been building energy projects as a lawyer, and I knew that there were some similarities to how we did clean energy projects. But I never thought that building clean energy projects could replicate and exacerbate inequality and harm and marginalization. And back in 2010, by the time I made it there, it was pretty unpopular to suggest that we needed to think about the equity dimensions of our energy transition. We needed to think about justice and indigenous rights. Many of you probably, and many of us in the environmental movement, were just concerned with making climate a kitchen table issue. We were just concerned with making it a part of the lexicon, getting people to believe that climate change was a thing. And it was seen as sort of slowing down progress if you introduce things like equity or introduce things like inequality or indigenous rights. And so that began my journey to working on issues of energy. Now, I eventually got brought back in energy justice in particular. So I eventually got brought back to the States. Lots of mentors were like, girl, what are you doing down there? Like, come back. I was mentored and I became a law professor. My first job was in San Francisco, but then a good friend of mine recruited me to the University of Hawaii to teach at the law school there. And up until that point, I had been looking at indigenous rights in Mexico. But she said, there are some similarities here in Hawaii. And so I landed in Hawaii in 2014, when Hawaii was on the front page of every energy magazine, essentially, because of its energy transition. So it's a small place. You can meet everyone in the energy field pretty quickly, which I did. And everyone I talked to there, I would say, okay, I get it. This is a really interesting place. You're moving fast on decarbonization. You're moving fast on solar penetration. But where do communities fit in any of these hyper-technical conversations? And they would say, almost to a person, communities just care if the lights come on. They don't care about the technical pieces. And I said, well, this is bigger than that. I looked around Hawaii and I saw indigenous communities and predominantly communities of color housing all the dirtiest energy infrastructure in the state, along with a lot of other things. So there was an environmental justice concern. In Hawaii, they paid 3 times the national average for their energy, on top of already high living costs. So I started the energy justice program at the law school there, which was much to the chagrin of some, but it became a thing where we actually introduced energy justice into the policy debates in the state. From there, I landed at Northeastern University, which is my alma mater, and I was able to start a national conversation through the Initiative for Energy Justice, another organization I started, because I saw that everywhere in the country we were having the same issues where communities were being left out of energy policy debates, the technical pieces and discussions regarding the transition. So that's a little bit of my background, what informs my perspective, but again, who I am as a person, someone who's lived with and experienced inequality in a really personal way, informs how I do the work. So, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that, but I've talked enough already.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And I just think what you've told us about yourself now reiterates how lucky we all feel to have you here. So it's exciting. It's very exciting. We hope that you're excited as well and would love to know what drew you to this position. You're such an amazing change agent. What energizes you about the opportunities here?
Sure. Well, I was told that you all were ready for change. So, and that there was this sort of pent-up demand for additional leadership around sustainability and climate. And to me, it was great to sort of be a part of the interview process and still lead with justice. I mean, justice isn't necessarily in my title, but there is this implicit understanding that justice would be how we approach sustainability and climate action on this campus. So there was an appetite for what I bring and would bring to the table, and that was exciting to me. I think the University of Michigan, more than many universities around the country, has extraordinary resources at its disposal. And so the resources were also very exciting. And when I talk about resources, I'm not just talking about the financial resources, I'm talking about all of you. I mean, many of you have been working on issues of sustainability, climate, energy, food systems, all the things that kind of contribute to a sustainable world for decades, some of you. And so understanding that I would come into a community that was really primed for hard discussions, debates, discourse was really exciting to me. So, the enthusiasm as well as the resources really drew me. And then the stated focus on sustainability, climate action, and environmental justice through the Vision 2034 plan really got me. And so I've been put in many situations without resources, without enthusiasm, and without a playbook. So I think, I'm starting off on a much better foot in this role.
Fabulous. That's great. And I know you've only been here a month, so you're still getting to know us, though your schedule has been very full. I can attest to the difficulty already to get time with you because everybody wants a piece of you, which is great. But while you're learning about us, are there specific opportunities here that have caught your attention? Or what are some of the things you most want to dig into and learn more about in the next few months?
Yeah, I mean, I think this event is fantastic. And Jennifer, I'm so excited I get to work with you closely at the Graham Institute, but also I get to work with Tony Kalinick at the Matai, I said it right, Botanical Gardens and the campus farm. So there are already, folks that I get to work with every day. But I'm also excited to get to know you all. So again, this event is a way to do that. I'm excited to sort of create structures for collaboration. Again, many of you are already collaborating kind of here and there, but I really do want to create sustainable systems and models for us to work together. The capital campaign also, I think, provides a great opportunity for us to align on vision, align on sort of where we want to be as a community on some of these really hard issues. And I think that's a great time to be here. So, and I already mentioned Vision 2034, which to me gives us a sort of North Star to march toward. But we can set a vision, but we need to sort of think through how we actually get there. And so that's really exciting to me.
That's great. So at the risk of embarrassing you.
Uh-oh, wait.
Sorry, we're out of time.
Is it in the, no.
No. We heard that one of the people who gave references for you said that your superpower was bringing people together. And so I think that's something that we here at the University of Michigan need. We're very dispersed and siloed. In something like decarbonization research, where the interdisciplinary nature of that work is so important, do you have thoughts on how you would approach collaboration with researchers from very different disciplines, especially folks with highly technical expertise?
Yeah, so, I'm grateful for that person's comment. But for context, I went to the Department of Energy, which is 100,000 people. And my job was to make sure we had a just and equitable energy transition. Go, right? 100,000 people, most of whom are scientists, engineers, really have no touchstone, right, for justice and equity, didn't understand it, didn't know that energy justice is a field of scholarship that lots of people are writing in and talking about. And so I really had to do a lot of relationship building, education around energy justice, really wanted to understand where people were coming from as well, so we could meet somewhere in that journey to create a more just and equitable energy system. One of the tools I kind of deployed was, again, creating systems and structures for collaboration. So I think that's going to be key to effective work. We all have enough meetings, so I know that. But I also think there's a need to connect and talk and sort of iterate on things. So again, I want to create the right leadership structure at the right level, the sweet spot, to provide opportunities for consistent collaboration across campus. I also think the institutes and centers here are really rich. I mean, just going through the co-sponsor list for this event, it's just like jaw-dropping that so many experts, nationally renowned, internationally renowned experts live here and work here at the University of Michigan. So I really want to leverage and catalyze the power of those institutes and centers to really move the needle broadly. And I do think folks who direct centers can be a little entrepreneurial. It's like, hey, I want to do this. And that's an exciting thing. There's sort of a personality type that fits within that. I think more than anything, though, if you all walk away from this conversation with nothing else, it's that decarbonization happens in places. It happens in places. And so whether you're doing hydrogen or the transportation, carbon capture, all of it is happening in communities and in places. So even the earliest stage researchers thinking about their questions have to, I think, contend with and consider that everything is going to be deployed in communities. So I often kind of push back on models, these large-scale decarbonization models, because they kind of render invisible communities and places and census tracts. And so I think it's important for us to keep that in mind, and that can be a common thread that links all of us together, right? This idea that what we're doing is about community, it's about people, it's about places. I also think it's really exciting that Michigan itself has embarked on this really ambitious climate journey. And we have the experts here at the university who have been working closely with the state. I'm really excited to leverage the excitement in the state to make Michigan, the state, a model for just transition. And so that means the hydrogen hub that's happening up the road in Illinois that has, a footprint here too, is going to be a part of that model. The workforce development that's happening because there are billions of dollars that are about to flow into this state, that's going to be a part of that broader model for just transition. So again, thinking about place, thinking about people and community, but thinking about all the technologies, including the workforce development aspects as a part of that just transition conversation. That's what I'm excited about here.
That sounds great, really great. And a lot of people, I think, are looking to Michigan as a place where if we can make it work, that provides hope for the region and the rest of the country. So glad you're going to be part of that. Let's talk a little bit about your time at DOE, a little more. I would say in particular, from your time there, what did you develop as your understanding of what we need to decarbonize the United States, especially in relation to the impacted communities? But do you have thoughts on where we ought to be focusing our attention in that area based on your time at DOE?
Yeah, so again, this goes back to this idea of people and capacity. So we had over $1 trillion across all federal agencies through the bipartisan infrastructure law, through the Inflation Reduction Act, $1 trillion to spend on decarbonization, on the climate crisis. At DOE, we had $100 billion to spend and 60 new programs that were going to be stood up under bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act. So my job was to work with others to kind of design those programs in a way that was equitable, but also to make sure we maximized our ability to deploy these new technologies. And what I realized, kind of my biggest takeaway in all of that, was that the energy transition is not about money. We have the technologies. I mean, I actually think we're well on our way. We have the right mix of technologies. We need to do more on efficiency, always. But we have the right technologies. We have money now, and I think the private sector is going to step up, and we need another big bill with more dollars. But money is not the sort of limiting factor. It's power. It's power. And so at the department, we were relying on the same incumbent players to do the work, right? So many of the seasoned folks who apply for DOE money and get it all the time, universities like this one, industry players, oil and gas companies, we relied on them to apply for our money. But again, to do the decarbonization that we need to do at the scale and speed we need to do it at, we have to bring communities along. And what that means is we have to redistribute power within that. Because communities are going to look at you and say, I understand you have all of your fancy decarbonization tools. You want to bring this toolkit to me. But where's my place in this narrative? And so what I learned at the department was that we have to be considering communities, but not only considering them, we have to bring them to the table on day one. And we have to give them something as a result, which is really a redistribution of power. And so again, I think we have the technology. Of course, we're still trying to refine that and make it better. We still want to have new innovations in that space. We have some good resources that are starting to flow through our economy, but none of it will matter if communities don't see themselves in that, or if they feel further harmed, or further disempowered by this larger decarbonization effort.
And for them to see the benefit to them
Correct.
In this transition. I remember an anecdote, even within the state of Wisconsin, that people in rural Wisconsin didn't want to house renewable energy if all that power was just going to go to Madison or in Milwaukee, right? So it's also very much about that. So that's great.
Redistribution of power in many ways, right?
Yes, exactly.
The political power.
When you first said we need power, I thought, what kind?
Right.
That's great. That's great. All right. Well, I think the other thing that would be interesting to folks here is, what do you see as the biggest gaps in our understanding of the decarbonization technologies? When you think about those communities and bringing them along, what do they most need to know, or what do we most need to improve?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's about large-scale community energy planning that involves communities, again, from day one. So we know that we will need a mix of technologies. I know that there is the fastest path to zero initiative here, focused on carbon capture, right, is one of the things that you all work on. Communities don't understand that. And some of them, I mean, many communities do and are getting more and more sophisticated by the day. But I think explaining the technologies and again, explaining the economic benefits or other co-benefits that may emerge from technology adoption would be helpful. But thinking about the transition holistically and in a way that, again, engages communities in a broader plan, not only for the community, but for the state and for the region. I think that's what's gonna bring folks along. And that benefit piece can't be, overstated. It is so essential to really winning. I mean, for those of you who work on these technologies like hydrogen, what a tragedy if you can't actually deploy that technology, if you think it is the key to our decarbonization effort. And we know that we do need a mix. I mean, IPCC has said we need a mix of all the things. But there's a way in which deploying all of those technologies incorrectly can replicate inequality and harm. And so we have to be mindful of that.
We are almost out of time. So my last question is, what didn't I ask you that you wanted to be asked?
Oh my gosh. What didn't you ask me? Well, the first question, I just felt like I kept talking on and on. There's so much that has contributed to my showing up here in this seat in Palmer Commons in September 2024. I didn't mention, though, that my family struggled with energy insecurity, and I kind of alluded to that in my introduction as someone who is African American. But I want to kind of paint a picture of the stakes just a little bit. 1 in 3 Americans experiences energy insecurity. And some of you may know about energy insecurity because, again, the stats are pretty glaring. 1 in 3 Americans, that means doing really dangerous things to keep your home safe, or not running the AC in one of the biggest heat waves that we've ever experienced. People die because of energy insecurity. It's a direct outgrowth of the cost of energy. So I grew up in a home that was energy insecure. My mom had a pretty decent job. She was a government worker. We weren't rich by any stretch. But in the winter, we would open the oven to knock the chill out of the house. I'm seeing some people nod their heads because that's a common thing and it's super dangerous. But we lived with that kind of energy insecurity, and that's something I learned about as a scholar, but it's a part of my lived experience. My father also grew up in one of the dirtiest, most polluted communities in the country, Port Arthur, Texas. And so Port Arthur, Texas is home to the existing fossil fuel architecture and infrastructure of this country. It's a terminus for one of our largest pipelines in the country. It has the largest oil refinery in the world. It's a majority Black and Latinx community where the majority of the community is also low income. So my dad grew up in that place. And I think about him because he died in his early 50s. And he never got to see this. He never got to see me, in the role that I am. But I continue to work with his community as a leader at the Department of Energy because that community and so many like it were asked to house our energy infrastructure for a century. And now we're going back to those communities and saying, well, we want to try out carbon capture here. We also want to try out hydrogen. And so, again, we need to think about those dimensions of our energy system and generally as we think about our broader transition away from unjust systems as well. So I say those two pieces because those are parts of my background and my history. And so when you are engaging in a conversation with me, justice is always going to be a part of that conversation. And that'll always be in the ether. I'm so excited to work with some of the smartest people on the planet on one of the hardest problems that we have as a species, and it's a generational problem. But again, that thread is that all of what we do and all of what we study happens in place. It happens in place. And our transition is happening. All of the systems that we're trying to transition are transitioning on top of a system that is woefully unjust. So that's, to me, the takeaway.
Please join me in thanking Shalanda.